channel. I'm a New York City-based actress. I'm also the host of the podcast Mentors on the Mic, where I interview accomplished mentors in entertainment about how they started and how they moved up. So perfect for what we're going to talk about today and the journey of filmmaking. I want to thank Patrice and Susie for putting together this incredible virtual film festival, and not just any film festival, but the Imagine This Women's International Film Festival, where we highlight female storytellers. So this is incredible. And right now we have three beautiful, wonderful filmmakers who are going to talk about their incredible films. We're also going to have one person joining us shortly who's in an interview right now, so she'll come shortly. But if all of you guys could just go around and just introduce yourself and then a little bit about your film for those who have seen it, just as a reminder. And for those who haven't, just, the films are available till October 4th. Please check them out. They're all fantastic. Why don't we start with Chen?
Sure. Hi, my name is Chen Drachman. I am the executive producer, writer, and cast member of the Book of Ruth, which is kind of hard to talk about without giving too much away. I will say it is starring Tova Feldshuh, which you might know from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, The Walking Dead. And it is basically a story about a family which visits their grandmother for Passover. And throughout the movie, we kind of like unravel a years-long family secret that has to do with some pretty famous historical events. And the movie kind of centers about a conversation between the grandmother and the granddaughter, a confrontation about that specific secret.
Well said. That was great. You're probably so used to saying the synopsis of your film.
Not without spoilers. That's always kind of tricky, but yeah.
I mean, I feel like, that could be a choice at some point, but at this point, it might be nice to talk about those details too. So I'm going to leave that sort of decision.
Sure. I mean, I guess like a spoiler warning for those who care. And then I'll say, so Tova is basically portraying an older version of Anne Frank who survived the Holocaust without anyone knowing, and we meet her in the movie as a grandma in her 80s, and her family didn't know, but they kind of find out. So the movie is kind of like surrounding that reveal.
Yes, love it. And Lauren?
I might just pop myself. I have dogs, so I apologize in advance if there's barking in the background. But my name is Lauren Blackwell, and I'm the director of Métèque. And Métèque is a story. It's based on true events about a young woman from Morocco who's living in London, and suddenly, due to administration error, she's faced with deportation. At the same time, she's also coming to terms with her own sexuality and her sexual orientation and this deep, unrequited love that she discovers. So yeah.
Wonderful. And Maya?
Hi, I'm Maya, and I'm the writer and director of Freeze. And Freeze is a surrealistic dark comedy about women navigating a world by men in their 30s and what it does to their psyche, and specifically through the lens of their fertility. So wanted to make a film about the experience I'm going through as a woman, as highly autobiographical film. And it was made mostly by women. And we wanted to make something that was really fun and funny and entertaining to watch, but also really true to the, the darker sides of it. And yeah,
okay.
It's fun to make.
Well, so I'll piggyback off of that, Maya, and ask you guys all afterwards as well. What was the initial inspiration for this particular film? So you mentioned it was autobiographical, but to what extent, and what how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, I mean, really, I kind of wrote it as catharsis, actually. Like, I really just put my heart on the page with this one, not necessarily expecting to even make it. I was thinking of, obviously we all want to make films about stuff we're passionate about. Otherwise it's pretty hard to get through making films. It's a labor of love. So I knew I wanted to make something that was something I could connect to, and that the women making the film with me could connect to. And so it was kind of a natural subject matter. But in addition, I think I also, I kind of started with the premise of it, which again, this would be like a really big spoiler, but, you know, when I went to an egg freezing consultation, a lot of the film is very autobiographical. I, you know, had a thought like, what if fill in the blank was the news you got when you went to freeze your eggs? And then that was sort of like the premise I started with in terms of like the plot. But really the film is like less about the plot and more just about like how women are expected now. It's great. We have the freedom to direct movies and run boardrooms and all that. That's awesome. But nobody can really hold the burden of giving birth to children besides us as well. And I think society has not readjusted to supporting women and doing both of those things. I think we still live in a society that doesn't have services that support women who want to be mothers and also be business leaders and creative leaders. And so what we're left with is like a really anxiety provoking decision every single day of our lives, whether to focus on one or the other. And everybody else has an opinion about how we should spend our time when really it's up to nobody but ourselves how to use our own bodies. So in some ways it's kind of like just social commentary and an activist piece that I wanted to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for making it, because I think it really took on, you know, something specific for all women can relate to in their own way. Also, the fertility business is such a like a thriving business. I mean, they make so much money from this; it's crazy. Which I mean is pointed out in the film. Lauren, would you like to discuss a little bit?
Sure. So Lena DeBarry, who wrote the script, it was a close friend of hers that this all happened to, and she actually read the emails that were taking place between this woman and the HR department, and we used some of those verbatim in the script. And it was this story, then, you know, obviously the looming dread of Brexit, on top of the fact that all of my friends were all from different countries, but London feels like home. And then what is that when you're from somewhere else, but in another country feels like the place that you identify the most with? Which one do you actually belong to? You know, what decides that actually at the end of the day, beyond laws and regulations? And, you know, what just opening up that kind of that conversation of how fair is the system that we're currently working with at the moment? You know, we should be having a little bit more choice. There should be a different way of thinking about it. And it felt very current and very important to us at the time.
Yeah, there's that line that was so memorable of how she was like, doesn't she get a decision in where she lives and where she wants to live?
And my favorite line from the film is, I used to be so angry at people who were born on the right side of the sea, but I was born on the right side of the streets. And that's what it is. It's just luck. Luck can determine your entire life. And when there is the opportunity, when there is the possibility of you being able to make your life better or follow your heart or pursue this career, achieve these dreams, and you can't just because of a piece of paper, it's like, it doesn't seem to make sense. So,
or even like a technicality in her case, because she thought,
it was just a technicality for her. It's crazy.
So nuts that she and she says to them, she's like, don't you guys have responsibility in this too?
And they just wipe their hands clean. Yeah.
I can't imagine that being emails. I might have to come back to you on that with HR. But Chen, how about you? How was that inspiration for your film? How'd you come up with that idea?
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam released a study. And I keep saying people don't realize, but they still release studies pretty often, like every other year or so, new segments from the diary that had never been published before, stuff like that. So 5 years ago, and it was actually around Passover, which was very convenient for plot purposes, they released a study that spoke of how the date of her death was actually at a different time than originally assumed. And it got a little bit of media coverage, and there was this one media outlet that reported that story, but they had like a teeny tiny punctuation mistake, and it kind of changed the whole meaning of the thing from like, oh, she died in a different date to we don't really know what happened to her. Now, unfortunately, we very much know what happened to her, but it kind of launched this whole like what if scenario in my head. And because I kind of did want it to be grounded in reality, I figured that if she was alive today, obviously we wouldn't know. And then I was trying to answer the questions like how, in what scenario we would not know? What would be a reasoning of a person psychologically to keep something like that to themselves, what kind of a person she'd be today. I was very curious about where she'll find herself. Like we very early on zoomed in like around nature, secluded. So that was pretty much it. And so trying to, and also, I don't know why, I really honestly don't, but like I noticed that I write a lot about the dark side of fame. I think it's something that a lot of artists don't really want, but it's just the byproduct of like being successful. So that idea of like having her in a position of something she never sought for herself, but was kind of like thrown upon her, was very interesting to me. I think we tend to think like we know the people that we are fans of just because we're literally letting them into our living rooms and whatnot, but we don't really, and they didn't choose us just because we chose them. So that idea was kind of also like snuck in there along with like memory and roots and all of that.
And how, I mean, I've obviously read some reviews on it, but how have people been receiving it? Because in some ways you're taking the story that everyone loves and changing kind of the ending in a way, which is really me think. But as someone also Jewish, I was a little thrown initially and then was like, oh, this is really beautiful. So what kind of reactions have you been getting from different people?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, good. I mean, I guess if not, people won't tell me, but
You'd be surprised.
I feel
like people are really like vocal about
us Jews. Yeah, we're vocal about stuff, especially Israelis. But yeah, but I think, and that's something she discusses too, you know, and that's a whole point of the debate, like the greater good. How much are we willing to like? What would be the right choice for her to make, not just for her, but for the world? Like, is it better that we don't know? Because it's kind of like she said, and that goes back to the fame thing. If we knew that she was alive, some people would be happy, but then some people would like, there would be something gloaty about it. And at the same time, it's exactly what she says in the movie. Like, if she were alive today, she would have the story of a survivor. It would still be a very traumatic story. So she's saying like, maybe I didn't have that abrupt end, but millions of people still did. So I think what she's trying to say is like, what this is greater than me, than just a person. And I love your optimism, thinking that people would be happy, but I guess she's maybe a little, and I am a little bit more cynical than that. So, and that was another thing. I like the idea of people like watching it and thinking, what would be her version of my, like, how would I imagine her today? Like, and we spoke about it at length, like she could have become an activist. One of the things we talked about is maybe she did end up being an author, which is something she spoke about wanting, but maybe she wrote under a pseudonym because she would not want that fame. So, you know, but for the most part, it seems like people are intrigued, and these are exactly the types of questions that are coming, like, why this path and not another? I'm like, that's the path I kind of envisioned for her, but I could also see it like split into a million different directions. And part of this, the sad part is we'll never get to know who she would turn out to be. So
right, there's so many possibilities there. Yeah. But it was nice because you created this whole story even prior to that detail being dropped, where you have her life with her family, Passover dinner. So I wanted to ask all three of you, especially since the casting I felt like was such an integral part of each of your films. How did you go about casting it? And what was it like with the actors that you ended up casting? How did that change sort of the story overall? Lauren, do you want to start with you?
Sure. So the two women who it's kind of the leads, so Samia and Zoe, they kind of wrote the script together.
Yeah.
And I mean, I suppose when you are in that writing process and you're thinking about, you put parts of yourself in it automatically. So it was written for them in a way, which was really beautiful. And what's amazing about both of them, which I don't know if I'd ever be able to do that with the script, but as soon as they wrote it and they handed it to me, that was it. They were done as writers and they were just there as actors. And they were just there to like completely embody the character, completely take on the vision that we had discussed before. And they were really incredible in that. And then through the other cast members, it was luck. We were really lucky. I mean, the woman who plays Mrs. Chambers, she had just worked with Lena on like a recent production, and she was like, you have to see her. She's got this gravity. You have to meet her. And I did, and I was like, yes, exactly what we need. Oisin is this really incredible Irish actor who's just got this wicked sense of humor. And we wanted, it's a heavy movie, it's a heavy topic, but you want to have those moments that just kind of shake you up and let you dust off a bit so you can dive back in. And he's got this very, very good way of doing that. And then Elliot's, he's very good at playing this naivety and shame. I hope he doesn't get upset with me when I say this, but still managing to kind of be a bit of an asshole, but you kind of feel bad for his assholeness because it's like, oh, he doesn't know any better. And then you catch yourself in that thought of, wait, how am I excusing him? And I like that was my thought process when he was reading to me. I was like, oh, shame. No, actually not shame. It's 2020, get it together. It was a very close-knit family and group of friends, and a very personal and intimate kind of process. And I think it was needed because we had such a short time frame to do it in. So we were very lucky.
How long was filming?
3 days in London, and then I think like half a day in Paris for a couple of hours. Quite quick.
A moment where there was that flashback scene where the two girls are like dancing in front of on the bridge, and I was like, I think that's Paris. Like, I think they went to Paris for this. Which I
we really wanted to not have the Eiffel Tower. And we were like, people have been to Paris, they're gonna know it's Paris, it's fine. And it's less about the location and more about the feeling and the essence of the two of them together in that moment. I love that. I often go back and just watch that scene because it's just completely unadulterated freedom between the two of them.
How did the two of them come to you, just as a follow-up? How did the two come to you to direct?
So we actually did our masters together in London. And originally they didn't want to go with me as a director. But then I was speaking to them about the script because I was coming on as more of a consultant, and I kind of stole it, but I didn't mean to. But I think they realized this is a female-centered story and they wanted a female director. And it kind of all came together. Yeah.
Appropriate for this panel. That's awesome. And Maya, how about you? Thank you, Lauren. How about you with the casting for the film? How did that go about? Because you had some heavy hitters. I mean, there were some recognizable, wonderful actors in there.
Yeah, it was really a surprise domino effect that happened with casting. Originally, when I wrote the script, the first couple people who read it said, this feels like a TV show. You should make this a TV pilot. And I have done that, written it into a pilot script, but I didn't want to go through the very long, sometimes never gets made process of making a show. I was really eager to just go make it because my background is that I was a documentary filmmaker and a commercial director. I still am a commercial director. And I wanted to just go make it because I want to do more world building films, and I needed to go build a world, So I figured, let's just shoot this, but let's try to get a recognizable TV actor face or two and end up using it as a proof of concept to then pitch the show after the short is made. So that was the strategy we went with. We've actually premiered at an episodic festival. Our premiere is at Series Fest, and we won best digital short series at Series Fest. We won the grand prize there, which was really exciting. And kind of spoke to the original idea that this was a great proof of concept for a show. And so we wanted recognizable TV actors. We ended up getting them. I think once we got one or two, it was like, it is a domino effect. Like, it definitely gives your project legitimacy when there's a known name already attached, as we all know. And I think I was like really shocked, honestly. Like I said, I didn't even think the film was going to get made. And then the raising the money and getting the actors was like, it was the best experience of my life. And I feel so humbled by it in a way. And I think it really like renewed my faith in the business. I think I was in a spot of like waning faith and inspiration in this business for a lot of reasons. And then I realized that like I wrote a script that people really liked, felt was unique, and the story resonated with them. And the fact that actors that big would agree to do it, like just because they're true artists and they want to hey, you want me to, show up for one day and work for scale or whatever? Like, and I was like, really, you would do that? But they really they're looking for good scripts. They're looking for fun roles to play. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest factors in Freeze's success is just nobody is making dark comedies about women's fertility. And everyone had a story. Even the men, we did do auditions at first, and then we ended up not using anyone from auditions because everyone was offer only. But even the men we cast were my wife is this and that, film, everyone had a story about how IVF or egg freezing or this is the greatest theme in our life and I've never seen a comedy made about it, or, and so it just became clear that the concept itself was original and something that was people could deeply relate to and wanted to see more stories about. So obviously, we leveraged some prior existing relationships with agents and things to get those caliber of actors. But at the end of the day, no actor is going to be in your film unless they like the script and the concept. So I think it's all those things came together magically. And they're just all such nice people. And living in Los Angeles definitely helped because they all live right around me. So
can I ask who were the first one or two actors attached and then before it became this domino effect?
Yeah, actually, one of the first actors attached, I'm not going to say names of people who didn't end up in it, but is someone I've known for a while, amazing actor. And he ended up getting booked by his agents on something else and not being able to do it very last minute. So some of the first actors that agreed to do it that got us the bigger actors didn't even end up being in the film. But, and that's the other thing you have to you have to be honest with yourself. I mean, people look at a short, oh, it's a short, certainly agents aren't thrilled for their high caliber actors to work for no money on a short. And so you have to have backups and be willing to accept that if so-and-so has to fly to be on Fleabag set, you're not going to get them anymore for your film. So
that's true.
So we did have a lot of working with bigger actors. We did have a lot of that shuffling around that occurred. That was of course nerve-wracking, but part of the package you get with actors that large. But yeah, so one of the first ones not, and then Adrienne Grenier was one of the first people. And I think the last person we booked 2 days before shooting, something like that, was Kel Mitchell.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a great add-on. Just, and wonderful
amazing.
Scene. He's so funny with the little babies coming out of the egg carton.
And the nicest person ever.
Oh, good. How many days of shooting was yours?
5 days. Which sounds like a lot for a short film, but Freeze was a 15-page script with 8 locations and 10 characters and 30 VFX shots. So it was definitely a lot to bite off. People told me I was biting off more than I could chew before I shot it. So I'm just glad that it's done and we did it for the budget and in 5 days. I feel like it's an accomplishment.
Well done. It sounds like, yes. Wonderful. And then Chen, how about yourself? How'd you get your wonderful cast? I mean, I know you're also in it, but how did that come about?
Yeah, that was the easy part. Yes. So Tova, we emailed her. She said yes. So kind of like Maya saying, sometimes you just have to try. I too was astounded, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes we're just too afraid of trying something, and you already don't have it, so you're not going to lose anything by trying. And then, so we actually done a live reading at the JCC in Manhattan, maybe 3 years before we shot, and Tova read there too, and we kind of kept in touch. And when we gotten closer, when we secured the financing, we gotten closer, so we started doing auditions, and I knew I was gonna play her granddaughter, so looks-wise, it had to be somewhere there, around there. So we auditioned, and we've done a lot of Passover related improv, which was a lot of fun, especially since not everyone was Jewish, but everyone they were all troopers. And our news anchor is one of my best friends, who is also on Broadway, and I love her very much. So that was also pretty easy. Yeah.
Wonderful. And then I believe we have Natasha here, which is wonderful. So whenever she comes in, I'll start asking, hi, Natasha, welcome.
Hi, thank you. So nice.
Thank you I'm glad you were able to make it. We'll ask you a couple of questions. One, can you introduce yourself and a little bit about the film for those who don't know?
Hi, my name is Natasha Deganello-Girodi. I'm the director of Inmanencia. And Inmanencia is a film that is meditative connection with Mother Earth, and a way for us to engage more deeply with her and let ourselves be healed through that renewed relationship with her.
Love it. And just a little bit, I asked everybody, what was the original idea for this film? Like, how were you inspired to create this?
So I have, for many years, had a personal practice of engaging with the earth in this way. And much of my practice is basically nature-centered meditation. So I choose beautiful places in which to deepen my relationship with the earth. And I was working in Cuba as a producer on another film. And the director was running late to one of the filming sessions, and there was an amazing rainstorm happening, which was actually the opening of the film. Nice. At the location where we were filming. And I dropped into this practice right there, and then just standing there waiting for the director to show up. And it occurred to me that I wanted to capture it for my daughter. And so then I started to capture other moments in similar ways and wove them together to create this experience of Inmanencia.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. So one thing I thought, I mean, all of your films are obviously very different and they touch on very different themes, but there is something that I felt that connected all of them in its own way, which is this concept, or this device of time, if you will, right? So this idea of how much time do we have left, or how much time, in the case of Inmanencia, where you're spending time with nature, and maybe in a way that we're not used to anymore. Or I'm trying to think, in your film, in the Book of Ruth, there's this idea of how much time passes and then what happens to this historical figure over time. And so I wanted to touch base on how did you guys sort of think of time, and how did you play off of it? Because sometimes it just raises the stakes a little bit, maybe, in the case of for example, your film, Lauren. So I hope maybe if this makes sense, but I kind of wanted to just touch on how we use time in our storytelling. And Maya, can we start with you? How did you use time? I mean, especially with Freeze, right? With this idea of how much time we have left. There's this urgency. How did you use that in the story?
Yeah, I mean, Freeze is all about time. I guess, obviously films have core themes, or many themes that they touch on. I mean, certainly women's fertility is like the core theme, I guess, but really it's a film about time, because women run out of time earlier than men when it comes to fertility. And we're constantly reminded about that. And I think, like I said, like every morning we wake up, and I'm obviously generalizing for the female experience. There's all kinds of female experience, but in terms of our like inherent biology that kind of drives the underlying purpose that we were put on this earth, whether we want to admit it or not, every morning we wake up in our 30s now, we have like a choice of like, do I spend this time going on a date, or do I spend this time writing my screenplay? Do I spend this time going to IVF, or do I spend this time directing a movie? Do I spend this time giving birth, or and I really do think like it's really difficult to have it all. And it's sort of like the age-old question is like, can we divide our time between family and motherhood and procreation and intellectual goals, career and art, in such a way that both come out on top, or will one always suffer as a result of the other because we don't have unlimited time? So yeah, I really think like there's a clock in every scene in Freeze. I think every shot of Nora Zetner, there's a clock somewhere. There's a lot of Easter eggs in the film. Like, like even just like in the boss's office, there's like an old clock behind him, and they're like little things you might not notice. And then of course there's more obvious things like sound design of clocks and her in the clock room, which is supposed to be a manifestation of her anxiety about running out of time. And so definitely relate to the time thing.
Even just the women like pounding on the door, that image of just like that kept coming up. It was a recurring image of just the women on the door being like, let me in, like, or like crawling, like pulling at each other's hair. It's this idea of like, this is like a concern, we need this now, like that just visually just stuck out to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the angry female mob, as we called it, was definitely the most fun thing to film. And yeah, I was just like, that sort of, for me, was a satire about, I mean, the whole film is a dark satire, but was about like this idea that like the top fertility clinics in Beverly Hills, like there's wait lists to get in. And you think about it, if you call up and they're like, it's going to be a year till you can like do IVF with this renowned fertility doctor, like the woman sits there thinking about like all her eggs that are dying as she's waiting for the appointment. And so yeah, so the angry female mob is about, yeah, the collective anxiety of women running out of time to have children.
Yeah.
Basically.
And then Lauren, how about you? I mean, there's definitely that time, sort of similar, that anxiety that comes with time, and that she has to figure out her decision before she's kicked out of the country.
Yeah. There's that time which kind of raises the stake. There's the ticking clock kind of situation. But then what's always interesting for me is, you know, jumping between, you know, the time that's happening right now and then back to your memories, and how much your memories start to color your current reality and the decisions you're making. And I'm always interested in that kind of liminal space that I always tend to kind of hide in between the past and the present almost. It feels like a bit of safety because it feels familiar, and I can kind of manipulate it a bit and hopefully let it influence my current. So I like to play with those two different timelines. But yeah, there's definitely the pressure of the world does not stop turning when things get difficult for you.
Yeah, felt that. And then Natasha, can you tell us a little bit about, because it, you know, it's a little bit different, but there's still that element of just sitting there with that moment, with that view, and then maybe like a little bit of life happening, but it's almost like the still photograph come alive. How did you play with time in that way?
Yeah, so it's honoring that time that we've lost, that time that we've been disregarding in our relationship with the earth, just kind of running. It's one of the great oppressors of our time, is the way in which society has attempted to dominate and exploit time, has taken it even away from kind of a lunar alignment of operating with time to like thinking that we should be in full moon phase all the time. And Inmanencia, you know, when we stop the camera, there's no camera movement in the whole film, right? And when we settle into that stillness, there's something about stopping time in a way that aligns us more deeply into that experience. Yeah,
that's great. I love that. I have just this image, those images stick out because there's only really, I think, 4, right? And so you have time with them, you know?
Right. Yeah, and the things that, you know, by giving yourself that time, the things that you notice, you experience, you let yourself to feel, and like what you allow to settle during that time.
Yeah, I love it. And then Chen, how about yourself? How did you use this?
I'm thinking about it from like 2 different angles. So our director, Rebecca Roth, I remember when she was doing the mood board, she was talking about the house. Like the house was such an important part for us for this. And I don't remember her exact phrasing, but I think she said something about like the house will reflect like a life well lived. Like, you know, that house as is, that location was full of mementos. It looked like a museum, a lot of warmth when you just even come in. So it was very nice to find her in that point of time and kind of like think like about everything that she achieved for herself. Right. From a writing perspective, I think about what my character says as like a turning point for the character. She asks her, why are we talking about this now? And like the grandma asked, why are we talking about this now? And the granddaughter said, time isn't standing still, you know? So you were kind of talking about it from everything that happened so far. But for me, it was kind of like, she doesn't want her to pass without them having the chance to talk about it. Secrets have so much weight, and maybe it's like also like a final release in a way as well, like final freedom before, you know. So I also kind of look at it from a perspective of time is running out, but not in a terrible way, because it was a life well lived. So yeah.
I love that. No, and you definitely get that sense where you're not like super sad about it. There's this beauty in the time that was well lived. So just to wrap this up a bit, I just wanted to ask how we all can support you guys. So how can we find you on social media? Is there any other way we can support you? Why don't we start with Natasha?
Yes, best place to find me is on Instagram at rosa.guayaba. And my whole Instagram account is about reconnecting with the sacred in nature.
Oh, I love that. If you could actually, once you answer, if you could just type that into the chat too, that way we can all have it as well. Thank you. And then Lauren, how about yourself? How can we support you? Oh, muted. Yeah, I've done that a million times.
Almost a perfect Zoom call. So you can follow the film Métèque. We're on Instagram. I'll type it in at the bottom here, and then you can find myself at Lauren Sky Gem. Also typed underneath here, and I'll also add the two writers because they've also got some work coming up soon.
Excellent. Maya?
How can we support? Keep buying tickets to virtual festivals so the festivals stay alive so that you can see our films in the festivals in the upcoming years. I pretty much at this point do everything on Instagram as related to my film work. It's just Maya Albanese is my handle, my name. Like I post about any upcoming screenings of Freeze, any news about projects I have that have been greenlit. So yeah, I think just and spreading the word and supporting female-made films, not just giving us fellowships and putting us on stages to talk about women's rights, but like actually watching, funding, and getting our films made.
Yes, to that. And then Chen, how can we support you?
So I agree with Maya.
Yeah,
buy tickets to see our movie. And also the Book of Ruth film.com basically have all the handles up there, so you can just go and click from there. I'm at, well, I put it in the chat, but my name is too tricky, but it does have like a crew and cast page on the website, on the film's website, and that has links to my website with all the handles. So hopefully that one address, the Book of Ruth film.com, makes it easier.
Perfect. I'm going to write mine too, because I just realized I could do that too. All right, guys, thank you so much. This has been so great. I'm definitely going to follow all of you guys and support and encourage people to see these films because they're all so beautiful and well worth it. And thank you guys for having us at Imagine This, and support female filmmakers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Very nice.